welcome everybody to the Research Forum Research Update. We are delighted that you're here with us today, and we have some wonderful colleagues that are going to be speaking today. So we'll jump right into it. We're going to start with Lynn Haynes. For those of you who don't know Lynn Haynes is the Director of the Office of Research Compliance. And for another few days, she's also the interim director of the UW-IRB until a new director starts on February 1st. So Lynn, I will go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thanks, Betsy, and thanks everybody for allowing us this opportunity to give you some updates from the Office of Research Compliance and the IRBs. So as many of you know, over the last 2 years, we've been involved in a very large IRB efficiency project. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why we did it, what our accomplishments were, and what our outcomes are so far. So the reason we started this was because there was a survey in 2017 of faculty and staff, which really revealed some overall dissatisfaction with the IRB efficiency and effectiveness. We hired an external consultant to help us understand what were some of the operational challenges that were leading to some of these efficiency and effectiveness processes, and we set out to change them. So what were some of the inefficiencies that were identified? We had a lot of KB pages. We had over 1,500 documents between the HSIRBs and the EdSBS KBs, and they were sometimes inconsistent. It was really difficult to maintain. We had a large HSIRB committee and 2 separate minimal risk committees. We had 2 separate IRB offices and a reliant unit and a quality and compliance unit, and that was challenging for consistency across our services. Our Arrow application, especially the one where we required a standalone protocol, had a lot of duplicative information within the application itself. And that required a lot of extra administrative work for you creating the IRB applications and for the staff and committees in reviewing the applications, because we're reviewing everything in 2 places. We also realized that our minimal risk applications didn't have as much templated language as would benefit the review of those types of studies. And finally, there were concerns about, often multiple rounds of review between the study team and the IRB, even prior to the time a study got to the IRB committee, and we had pretty long turnaround times. So we wanted to address all of these things. So what did we do? Well, for the first thing, we decided to purchase and customize the Huron HRPP Toolkit. The toolkit is a comprehensive set of customized SOPs, worksheets, checklists, templates, and manuals for an AHRP accredited, compliant HRPP and IRB operations. So this met our goal of creating a single transparent source of documents for our operations. And all of our toolkit documents are found on our IRB website. We update the toolkit every 6 months, and you can find the toolkit documents here in the toolkit library. I want to just point out a couple of the really key documents that I think are important for the study teams and compliance teams. The one is the Investigator Manual, which is found in the manual section. This is where the majority of information that was on our KB sites now resides. Our KB sites will be going away this spring, as most of or all of the information will have been transferred to the manual. The manual is set up with sections that we hope are intuitive to find the information you need. For example, if you want information about conducting human participant research, this is where it's found: recruitment guidance, consent process documentation, research with special populations. At the end of the manual, there is a place to provide us with feedback. We take that feedback very seriously because we want this document to be a benefit to you and to provide you with the information you need. So please provide us with feedback. The other manual that's really important is our reliance manual. And like the investigator manual, this contains all the information you will need when you are doing multi-site research. Because it doesn't deal with the actual IRB requirements, it's more divided into sections about when, say, the UW is the reviewing IRB, or we are relying on an external IRB. And again, divided into what we hope are pretty clear sections. The SOPs, worksheets, checklists are primarily used by the IRB staff and the committee to do the IRB work. But again, we wanted them here so that they are transparent to the research community so that you know what we are doing and how we are doing it. The checklists in particular are the documents that allow us to meet the federal requirements for documenting the IRB decisions. So those are actually embedded in Arrow and they are completed during the review process. And you can find the completed checklist in the particular protocols in the history section. The worksheets are not completed and uploaded because there's not a requirement for documentation of the things that are in the worksheet, but they are documents that are used during the review so that we are, again, consistent across all of our IRB staff and committee reviews. A couple of the worksheets that I want to point out that are, again, really important for study teams and compliance folks are for example, the HRP 311, which is our engagement determination. This is the document that we use daily to assess whether an individual study team member should be added as a study team member. Are they engaged in the research? And if you're doing multi-site research, the first question we ask is, are the individuals at this other institution and therefore the other institution engaged in the research? If they are, then we need to have an IRB reliance agreement or coordination between the two. And if they're not, maybe what you need is something like a data use agreement because you're sharing data and they're not actually engaged in your research project. The other important one is the HRP 309, which is our institutional ancillary review matrix. This outlines the institutional compliance requirements for human subjects, research, activation, and operations. It isn't the same as the ancillary reviews that have to happen within the clinical research office, which are very focused on the hospital and clinical requirements, but these are sort of the institutional requirements: SCRO, biosafety, radiation safety, school approvals, et cetera. These are external, but the document outlines who and where and when you need to get those other reviews and approvals. The template section of the manual has both protocol and consent templates, and we update the toolkit about every 6 months, and some of these documents do get updated. So if you're starting a new protocol, a new application, please be sure to check here to be sure that you are using the most current version of our consent or protocol templates. Especially that's true for, say, the institutional consent language, which is language that you would need to put into a local consent if we are not the IRB of review, but you're doing a multi-site study. So somebody else, Michigan is perhaps the IRB of record, but we need some local context in it. That's where you would find some of that institutional required language. The second inefficiency that I wanted to talk about was the sort of large committees. And this was a pretty quick change, but we reduced our IRB committee. The HS committee used to have 17 members. That was a lot of people to wrangle together for a single meeting. It's now 9 members. We added 2 additional monthly meetings so that we now have 6 meetings a month to more quickly get your studies to an IRB committee meeting. And then we also merged the EdSBS and the minimal risk IRB committees because we realized we didn't have enough studies in going to either of those committees, and we found that there were studies that were sort of falling between the cracks between those two. Maybe it was a long-term social study that now wanted to do some biomedical research, or it was an educational study, but they wanted to study education within a clinical setting. By merging these 2 committees, we pulled together the expertise of these 2 really wonderful committees so that now we can review those kinds of studies with confidence. The next one was we had these separate offices. And so we underwent an administrative reorganization, again, to enhance our consistency in communication. So this was the organizational structure in 2019. We had a, excuse me, an EdSBS IRB office that was completely separate from the HS IRB's office. We had our quality and compliance team and our reliance team. Within the HS office, we had actually 3 separate little teams to do expedited exempt reviews, peer reviews of full board studies, and post-approval. This did not allow for us to be able to quickly shift work across these different groups, and to basically enhance our ability to do the reviews that we needed to do. We have recently reorganized, and we now have a single IRB office. And as Betsy said, starting next week, Lisa Wilson is going to take the reins of the IRB office. We still maintained 2 larger groups because we have expertise in the sort of biomedical, more than minimal risk studies, and the minimal risk type studies. But because we're under one office, we're doing things the same way. We can cross-train. We also have now several members of the Reliance team, excuse me, of IRB staff who are able to do Reliance work. Anna Martin is both an IRB and a Reliance analyst. And our 2 new Reliance staff hires, both Sarah and Nathan, are being trained to do both IRB and Reliance work. So again, we're not having to shuffle protocols back and forth, but we can have a single person who's managing that study for you from start to finish. We've recently reorganized again this group, and Travis Doran, one of our post-approval monitor quality compliance folks, has stepped into the role of the associate director in this group as of January 9th. Excuse me. When it comes to our Arrow application, again, we realized that having both a protocol and all of the information in the application was really duplicative and a lot of administrative burden. So in March of 2021, we launched our protocol-based application. And we try to clarify here, as well as in the Investigator Manual, the types of applications, the types of studies that would require a protocol-based application. Basically, it's any study where you already need a standalone protocol. If it's an FDA-regulated drug or device study, if it's a more than minimal risk study that will need ICTR scientific review, you should use the protocol-based application. If you're using the protocol-based application, the most important thing is to be sure that the protocol is robust and complete. And to do that, you want to start with a really good template. So the IRB has several templates, as I just showed you on our Toolkit library. ICTR has a wonderful template for drug and device FDA regulated studies. The Cancer Center has templates. The NIH has templates. The IRB is really agnostic about which protocol template you use. We just want you to use a robust template so that when you provide the information to the IRB, everything is there for the IRB to do a quick review of that application. Last November, I guess it's not actually last November, November of 21, we launched our rolled out our non-protocol based application. And this one embedded within it includes all of those protocols that you know and love: our healthcare records protocol, other exemption protocols, the PDAs are within this. And again, we've increased the amount of templated language we have in this protocol because we know there are sections where we know the right way to do it. And we're giving you options about, are you doing it this way or this way? Our other applications, of course, are the emergency use. Our single IRB application is the application to use when we are the IRB of review, and you will be doing multi-site research with 3 or more other institutions. And that one is actually being updated in the February 11th Arrow patch. And finally, of course, we have the request to seed when we're seeding to an external IRB. The big area, of course, was to improve our turnaround times. So we did alter significantly our intake and our pre-review process to help reduce the rounds of review and time to first response. So I'm going to talk in a little bit about the full board studies, but I wanted to show you the data on the studies that are reviewed outside of a full board review, because this is the majority of the studies that we actually review. In 2022, we reviewed about 250 expedited applications. And I'm really happy that we have been able to reduce the time to approval of these types of studies from an average of 25 to 30 days to about 20 days. For the exemptions and non-human subjects research, again, with the common rule changes in 2018, we saw a dramatic increase in the kinds of studies that can be reviewed and qualified as exemptions. And we have continued to review these very quickly and have also decreased our turnaround time for these types of applications. This graphic gets to that thought about the number of back and forths. And you can see in 2017, almost 50% of the studies had 3 rounds of interaction between the staff and the study team, even before the study got to the committee. We've dramatically decreased that. And instead, in 2021, more than 65% of the studies have a single round of review. You submit the application, we ask you for some comments, you respond to those, we put it on the agenda for a committee meeting. And that has, of course, translated to a faster turnaround time. Our time to first comments had typically been somewhere between 25 and 30 days. It is now down to a median of 10 days. And that has translated to a faster time to approval. We typically in the past had 75, 80 days from the time of submission to full board review. We are now down at about 45 days. And I'm incredibly proud of the IRB staff and the committee for these changes in the midst of this massive project that we have been doing. We want to note that there's like no change between how fast it gets. The red line is when it gets to the committee, and the green line is when it's approved. We didn't just increase the time after the meeting to approval. We've really been able to keep that pretty consistent as well. And there's not been an increase in the deferrals. My last slide here is a graphic of the time with the study team and the time to approval. And what I want to demonstrate is that if you are able to respond to the IRB very quickly within 10 days, and this is all the time with the study teams, both during pre-review and after the meeting, we are able to get those studies reviewed really, really quickly. And I'm happy to work with study teams and compliance groups to understand how some of these other studies get stuck so that we can help you get the answers that you need so that you can get on with the research that is so important that you're doing. So that's what I have to talk about. There's some our common emails down the bottom. We are always happy to consult or chat or answer specific questions that you might have.
Great. Thank you so much, Lynn, for that presentation and all the incredible work that the IRB has done. That's really been amazing. It doesn't look like we have any questions right now. So I
see 2 chats. Is that they're not questions? I do see 2 chats. I don't know what they actually are, but
I think it's from Kevin. Actually,
never mind. Okay.
Yeah, introducing people. Great.
Okay. So I then am going to introduce Betsy, who is known to all of you as our Chief Clinical Research Officer and our Director of the University of Wisconsin Clinical Trials Institute and the UW Health University of Wisconsin School of Medicine Public Health. Take it away, Betsy.
Great. Thank you so much, Lynn. And I will share my screen here. Wonderful. Well, thanks everyone for being here. And there is so much going on in clinical trials right now. So I'm going to give you some updates on a few things. Please know that we always have a lot going on. And so if you have any questions, about any of this or anything else, please put them in the chat so we can get to them a little bit later. So kicking right off, I just want to remind everyone of our clinical trial strategy for 2021 through 2026. So we still have a 4-pillared approach to clinical trials, which includes developing structures to really support research sponsors as well as investigators with easier access to our services, to build systems and processes that support our enterprise-wide clinical trials, to create a quality program that supports clinical research quality and compliance and prepares us for accreditation. And then lastly, to drive culture change by engaging with all of you, providers and patients, to enhance participation in clinical research. And so to really talk about that a little bit further in terms of 2023, we are really looking to increase the number of patients that are participating in clinical trials. So as an academic research center, we actually are sort of behind the curve. We have had less than 1% of our patients participating in clinical trials. And by fiscal year 2026, we'd like to have that at 4%. And just to give you sort of a measuring stick, some of the most successful academic research centers have around 9 to 10% of their patients participating in clinical research or clinical trials at some point. So by reaching 4%, we're about half of sort of the really remarkable academic health centers, and we hope to increase even more after that. But it's important for us to really focus on this area and make some improvements. So we're really aligning our measures into 4 areas: business development, infrastructure and shared resources, our quality management system. And for our culture change, we're really focusing on recruitment. And so you can see some of the focus areas that we're going to be focusing on in 2023 in each of those priority areas and the alignment of our measures to meet that particular goal. So there are some important changes that are happening in 2023. The first one is that we are now officially an opt-out institution. So what that means, we'll discuss in a little bit, but I think it's a really important change that we have made sort of the official decision as an organization to be an opt-out institution. The next is that we're going to have an increase in our indirect rate for industry-funded research, and I'll talk a little bit more about why that's important and why we're doing that. And lastly, we are in the pilot stages and getting ready to implement our budget template for industry-funded research. There's a wonderful work group that's been working on this, and I think it's a really important change for our institution that will really help us when we're working with industry sponsors. So to talk a little about being an opt-out institution, what this means for us at UW Health and UW Madison is that patients may opt out of recruitment. So this opt-out will be indicated in their chart. And once they have decided that they are an opt-out, they may not be contacted via any of these methods. So if they opt out, they can't be contacted by my chart, recruitment, mail, email, a phone call, or text, and we really don't use text here at UW. And so once the patient has marked that, none of these types of recruitment may be used with that individual. Now, one thing that isn't excluded when patients opt out is that a clinical provider may still recruit patients for clinical trials if they feel the clinical trial might be appropriate for them, either during a visit or a clinical interaction. And this is an important distinction because oftentimes when patients opt out of receiving recruitment messages, they have not realized that they might also be opting out of a clinical trial that could potentially offer treatment options to them. This is particularly important in cancer, but may be important in other areas as well. And so we want to make sure that those patients still have an opportunity to learn about clinical trials that may be treatment options for them. So when they opt out, they are not opting out of those discussions. Training for opt-out is still being developed, and it's going to be required for all study personnel because it's really important that we are consistent with the wishes of our individual patients and their desire to be contacted or not. The CURDS team, which reports to Jamal Matthew, may assist with pulling lists of patients for recruitment, and those opt-outs will be excluded when they pull those lists. So there will be more information forthcoming, but we wanted to make sure that everybody knew about this important change. Being an opt-out institution clearly is really important to us, and it gives us an opportunity to contact patients that want to be contacted and to not contact patients who do not. The next thing that's going to be happening in 2023 is the indirect rate for all our industry sponsors is going to change from 28%, which it's been for literally decades at UW, to 30%. And that's going to start on July 1st. This is only for new studies. It won't be retroactive. So studies that are currently already negotiated and underway with industry sponsors, they're going to stay at the same indirect rate they have now. Only new studies starting on or after July 1st will have the 30% industry rate. Because our indirect rate has remained the same for decades, we really have not been able to invest in infrastructure the way that we need to. And so even though this seems like a small change, it's really important to continue to be able to fund our infrastructure as we grow. The change that we made really does keep us in line with other similar institutions. So University of Michigan, Northwestern, Mayo Clinic, other institutions throughout the country have indirect rates somewhere between 29 and 34%, but we actually chose an indirect rate of 30% because we're in the process of growing our industry sponsored research, and we wanted to remain competitive with our indirect rate. Lastly, I wanted to talk about the budget template for industry-sponsored studies. So there is a wonderful work group that has been working so hard on getting a template together for all industry-sponsored studies, and it's currently being piloted throughout our organization. This template will go into effect on July 1st for 2023 for all new industry-sponsored studies. Again, it's for new study starts only. It's not meant to be retroactive. This budget template really outlines the fees that we need for our organization, and it provides ranges to assist study teams in their negotiations. And we have some incredible budget negotiators on this team. So if you find that you need help in budget negotiations, they have done an amazing job of putting this together and can offer advice. It's really important for all study teams to use the template once it's released, because there are new fees that will be charged to all industry-sponsored studies. So whether or not you have actually negotiated these fees, they may be charged to you. So it's really important that you use the template. It also allows us to be consistent in our organization with our asks from industry partners. So there may be a trial, for example, with Pfizer that's being done in the cancer center, but we may have another trial in dermatology also being done with Pfizer. This allows us to not have an industry partner play off of us using different department negotiated rates. We'll have consistent negotiated rates, and soon some of the big industry sponsors will just come to expect that we have specific fees at UW that they're going to need to pay. We're going to have more information about the industry-sponsored study budget template, and that will be available following the pilot. I did want to talk just for a minute about some of the really great news in clinical trials. What we have here is the clinical trial revenue, so the total revenue for the organization around clinical trials. And as you can see, we've had a substantive increase in our revenue from clinical trials, which is absolutely amazing. You can also see that we've had quite an increase from 2018 to 2022 in the number of clinical trials that we have open. This is really because of all of you and all of the hard work that you've done around clinical trials. I just can't emphasize enough the work that has gone in from our study teams to get us to this point. It truly is incredible. And so I wanted to make sure that all of you saw this and were aware of sort of where we're at in terms of our ability to increase clinical trials, both in our revenue and in our clinical trials count. And then I wanted to show you some projections. So I think many of you know that East Park will be opening in late 2024. Additionally, we are doing some consolidation of clinical trials functions and doing much better revenue capture. And so one of the things we want to do is continue to increase the number of patients that we're recruiting to clinical trials. So as you can see, the dark blue bar is the number of clinical trials that we will be increasing over the next 4 years. And so there's quite a substantial increase to about 3,200 is what we expect in 2026. But what we're really excited about is some of the recruitment opportunities that we may have using systems, both that are available to all of you and some new work that we're doing with Epic and some other vendors around clinical trials recruitment. And so we really expect our recruitment to be pretty close to 10,000 patients participating in clinical trials by 2026. So we have a lot of work to do, but we're really excited about the progress we've already made. And we'll continue to bring you up to date with changes and new opportunities that are coming forward. So that's what I have to talk about right now. And so I want to introduce our next speaker, who is known to some of you, but maybe not all. It's Dr. Jamal Matthew. She's the Associate Dean for Informatics and Information Technology. She's the Chief Biomedical Informatics, the Chief of Biomedical Informatics at SMPH. She's the Director of Informatics for ICTR. She's the Associate Director of Informatics for the UW Carbone Cancer Center. And she's also an Associate Professor in the Department of Population Health Sciences. So I will turn it over to you, Jamal.
Thank you so much, Betsy. It's so much fun to follow very eminent colleagues and also, partners in crime, even more fun. So you've heard from both Lynn and Betsy about a lot of developments happening on the IRB side and on the clinical trial stuff. And the informatics activities go hand in hand with these developments. So one of the topics that we had been working very intensely over the past year is making real-world data available for research. And you may have seen the emphasis that the FDA is now placing on real-world data. So with that in mind, we have established data sharing agreements with our hospital partners, UW Health, Swedish American, and Access Community Health Center. We are in discussions with Meritor at the moment, and we are hoping that that will be in place also this year. So these data sharing agreements allow us to, in a very careful way, bring in all the clinical data into the SMPH secure environment and make it available for research. So in order to do that, one of the challenges is we need first of all, a secure platform or secure environment where we have adequate number of servers, storage, compute capabilities. So we have built an environment in a cloud called Microsoft's cloud platform called Azure. And we are calling that environment Platform X. And within that Platform X, we are connecting all the pieces, like I said, from hardware to software to data, so that you have anytime when you do a research study, you can go back and look at your data. What data did you bring in? What manipulations or modifications or harmonizations did you do on the data so that it's high quality? And what analytical algorithms did you develop during the process or use during the analysis of the process? And where are your results? How do I link all through that data process? That is what is happening in the real world data collaborative. And over time, we hope to have not just the EHR data, but also environment data and state and federal and claims data, so that you have ability to link data of different kinds and analyze it and use it for a totally data-driven research approach. So the support that we are today providing for data-driven research include, like I said, real-world data itself. So if you want data from any of the hospital partners, we have to adhere to the policies outlined in the data sharing agreement. Betsy and I co-chair a policy committee, and Lynn and others participate in it. And it has been tremendously helpful to us in laying policies that gives confidence to the security privacy entities from our hospital partners. So we need to abide by those, but we'll be able to provide the data for retrospective studies, as well as for development of research registries. With the FDA's real-world evidence, that we are seeing an increase in the development of research registries. So we'll support those activities. We provide a self-navigation tool for feasibility assessment. It's called Trinitex. Any of you without any approvals, as long as you are an SMPH employee, will be able to access the system and query the data. And we are actually implementing a tool called CBio Portal for more clinical genomic data queries. And that system will be available sometime during this year. We provide help for example, if you're sharing data with another institution, oftentimes our definitions of data doesn't match that institution's definitions of data. Even if they use the same system, like for example, Epic. So we provide help for data mapping, standardization to common data models, and provide secure exchange. If you intend to be a data coordination center for a grant and want to bring data from multiple places and provide that data for future research, we provide that support too. And most often, those kinds of activities form the informatics component of large grants. For example, to build a disease-based data commons. We just submitted a grant today in asthma. Dr. Jim Gunn is the PI, and that is to build an asthma and allergic diseases data commons. We have other grants going in substance misuse and others for building specific data commons. So we provide support for secure computing and storage. If you have HIPAA data and wants to get computing and storage, it can be possible for a fee in the cloud. So feel free to reach out. We provide assistance for data management plans. The NIH just changed the data management policy, our data sharing policies. So you're supposed to provide a data management plan for every application that's going after January 25th. And so we'll be happy to provide assistance as long as you use the prescribed environments for data integration as well as analysis. In addition, we will provide access to a Wisconsin-wide diverse population through a cohort called SHOW, or the Survey of the Health of Wisconsin. I'm the PI of it, and SHOW was established in 2008, and over time, it was funded by WPP, and it has built a cohort of about 6,000 or more residents, and we have data and samples. And this is a disease agnostic cohort. So there are people who have become positive for a particular disease, for example, cancer, over time in this cohort. So if you are developing an assay that looks at biomarkers of the disease, then this is a wonderful cohort because we have pre and post data as well as samples. There is an oversampling that is done in Milwaukee area, so there is more diversity there. We are trying to also expand it to other populations through various research studies that are happening now. So if you're interested in using that cohort, feel free to reach out also. The informatics support for clinical trials, like Betsy said, it's our institution's combined priority for improving clinical trials enrollment and access to clinical trials. So over time, over the last couple of years, we have worked towards developing an integrated suite of tools for clinical trials management. We have a single instance of Encore. When both Betsy and I came in, we had two different instances, so it was extremely hard to get an understanding of the lay of the land in terms of the number of trials, what kind of trials are they, and also how many people are enrolled on trials. So we now have a single instance. We have migrated all the data, and the old instance is decommissioned, and any of the historical data is stored in the cloud. We have implemented a system called Florence for managing all the documents. And so you have access to that. It will be integrated with Encore to provide the connectivity. The scientific data collection, we have, again, about 8 instances of REDCap. None of them provide automated capabilities for bringing data from Epic, so people have to hand enter data repeatedly. So we are working currently on a single instance of REDCap that will be well integrated with Epic for automated data transfers. We hired an ontology data scientist, Andrea Pitkus, in my team to help with data standardization, because oftentimes if you are having multiple protocols in a particular disease area, it's good to have some data standards so that you can do meta-analysis across the protocols down the road. So we'll help you with that. We are in the early planning stages of a 21 CFR compliant instance of REDCap. This will be a separate instance which will be just used for IND studies where we hold the IND. And we're also in the early planning stages of a global health instance of REDCap, because many of our researchers do global health studies in other countries. It's very difficult to have a single instance that combines our data and the other countries' data, because we need a lot of people from those countries having access to the system, and it becomes a huge security nightmare. So we'll have a separate instance with specific features that can promote global health research. We are working with UW Health to see if we can implement the promise measures and the promise tools in Epic that Epic as a vendor has developed also, and this will help streamline patient-reported outcomes data collection directly from patients. So more to come on that over the next couple of years. We provide assistance for recruitment. And again, this is close collaboration with Betsy's group. And we can provide recruitment lists. So if you have a trial that you would like to have a list of candidate patients, you can obtain that from us. We are implementing a system called Deep6 because most of the capabilities that we had historically focused around non-textual data. And fortunately or unfortunately, a lot of the clinical data is in textual format. So hopefully the system will help in refining the development of that recruitment list, and will provide the recruitment list, including the textual data, once a system is fully implemented. And then for very difficult to recruit studies, you will be able to leverage EPIC best practice advisories. We have a research group that is funded through SMPH, who will help in development of the BPAs on the UW Health team. And also we will provide assistance for MyChart recruitment. So when Betsy and I came in, there was this whole question of, can we use MyChart safely for recruitment? So one of the thoughts that we had is like, rather than trying to like convince people, why don't we do a study so that we can prove or disprove our thoughts that this will make life easier for people. So we designed an implementation study on MyChart recruitment. So we picked 3 research studies and we tried to use MyChart for recruitment using 3 methods. So for period 1, we were sending messages through MyChart for those 3 studies. And the patients will receive email or SMS tickler. And but the patients will not have the ability to directly reply back or respond through MyChart. Period 2 was, there was this thinking that, oh, we just need to actually put the information there. Patients will come. We don't need to send ticklers or emails through MyChart. So that's tested during period 2. And period 3 is more focused on implementing the features that EPIC has developed. So there'll be a research page in MyChart, and the patients will be able to see, for example, their studies that they are currently participating, and also see the studies that they may be eligible for. We can send messages to them and they'll be able to reply back to us. And our hope is that we can connect the patients with the study team through this process. And one of the other critical features is we don't want to send messages to everyone. So like I mentioned before, we create recruitment lists. We validate those recruitment lists with the study team, and then we populate MyChart for patients to receive the information about the studies that they are eligible for. So we had been working on this since last June, and we are in period 3 now, and we are hoping to wrap at the end of March. And after that, we should be able to analyze the results. So we had some hypotheses. We were hoping that compared to traditional recruitment methods, MyChart recruitment will increase the patient response rates, decrease the amount of time, and it will not result in increased research opt-outs, because this was a fear, like all the patients will tell us that they don't want to participate anymore. And secondarily, period 3 workflows will be more effective for period 2 workflows, where we are actively engaging the patients and allowing them to have an opportunity to reach back through MyChart. So our preliminary results are that this does decrease the amount of time needed to reach recruitment goals. One of our surprises was the Fitbit study met its recruitment goals during period 1. So unfortunately, they were not going to be part of our period 2 and 3, but it's still nevertheless a great conclusion. We see increased team satisfaction with recruitment. We are collecting formal quantitative results, but so far the feedback has been positive. And it hasn't resulted in increased research opt-outs. 1 out of the 356 patients have asked to opt out for future research requests. But the beauty of this is now we have a central place to actually, put their opt-out information, and we'll be able to honor that request from the patient all through after this. And so based on these, like I said, it's still preliminary results. We are bound to analyze this formally, and we are hoping that we'll be able to open my charter recruitment for non-interventional studies by late spring or early summer. And with all these tools and approaches, we'll be providing more informatics training. We'll be starting informatics tools training probably late spring in a formal way. And then we had an informatics seminar series where we invited speakers from outside last year. We'll be also doing that starting next fall. And, if you have questions, there's a lot of things and topics, but feel free to reach out to Laura Laddick, who is our department administrator, or feel free to reach out to myself. I'll stop there, and we'll be happy to take questions.
Great. So I will ask Kevin and Rochelle if you all have received any questions that we need to or can address. Hopefully we can address them.
There is a question from Sarah Asmund about show. Sarah, feel free to reach out. I'll be happy to go over the ongoing studies that we have at the moment.
And Betsy, there was a question about the opt-out situation that I had direct.
Yep.
See that? Okay, great.
Yeah, so the question is, does implementation of the opt-out affect the need for a clinical provider to engage with the patient prior to the research member contacting the patient? In other words, does a patient opt in to hearing about research unless they opt out, thus negating the need for providers to bring up research to the patient first before the study team contacts the patient? So the answer to this is a little bit complicated, and I may ask Lynn and Jamal to jump in as well. The recruitment strategy needs to be approved by the IRB. So it really depends, if it's an interventional treatment trial, it probably is still best for the provider or somebody from the clinical team to talk with the patient about the intervention first. However, we do have clinical trials teams that are integrated now within clinical teams. And so in those cases, it may be appropriate for them to approach or talk to a patient, but it really does depend on what you have put forward to the IRB as your recruitment plan and what they have approved for you. So I don't know, Jamal or Lynn, if you want to address that anymore.
I think you covered it, Betsy, and it's very important, particularly if you have ongoing studies. Just because the system is available, we will not be able to do it. So it is very important that if you really want to leverage the recruitment approaches that we mentioned here, your IRB protocol outlines that, and any language, for example, that you would be using for the communication has to be also approved by the IRB. So, but we'll be happy to provide assistance if you want to, check and see what kind of modifications you need to provide or do. We'll be happy to help with that across the 3 groups.
I have nothing additional to add, because I agree completely. And again, going through your services, Jamal, which ensures that especially if you're using an email recruitment, that we are respecting the opt-out preferences of individuals is really important. So
I think the
Yeah,
other
and,
thing that
you
I
know-
will say about opt-out is that it does give us clarity around the fact that when patients do come to an academic medical center like ours, they are being informed that we do participate in research, and they may be asked about it unless they tell us specifically they don't want to be. And I think that is a huge change from sort of the nebulous nature that we had before, where we really didn't have that defined. And so there was some question about whether or not it was appropriate to approach patients. And so I think now having that clarity really helps us, in particular with thinking about appropriate recruitment techniques for different studies that we can propose to the IRB. It also gives the IRB clarity around where our institutions, both SMPH and UW Health, stand on opting, approaching patients and asking them if they want to participate in clinical trials. And Jamal, I think you had something else to say.
Yeah, thank you, Betsy. I think, again, you covered it. Just one thing, sometimes we get a question like, can we just use these tools? Can we do it ourselves? The thing is, the reason why we are instituting these processes and having the team to help you is because there are policies that we need to abide. There are IRB policies or even security privacy policies, and also the data sharing restrictions that we have from these partners who have been willing and trusting to put the data in our environment. So it's not because we don't trust people, it's because we want to have a process, and in the event of any potential issues, we'll be able to confidently say that we did everything that we could as per the policies and guidelines.